There's no throne. There is no version of this where you come out on top.
So there actually was a throne, but does Loki actually come out on top? Let's talk about it. Hey guys, it's Sean O'Connell, the managing editor at Cinema Blend, and we are bringing our analysis of Loki Season 2 to a close after the magnificent finale that was called Glorious Purpose, just like Season 1, Episode 1. Loki comes full circle, and it's probably where some of you predicted, and it kept a lot of us guessing on the journey to get to that point. Without going into any of the major spoilers at this point right now, I'm going to give you guys a warning. We're going to have to get into specifics for not just Loki Season 2, the finale, but basically all of Loki going back to Season 1, essentially, and even some stuff that happens in the MCU up to that point. And then we're going to discuss heavily where we think a lot of these events are going to take the MCU moving forward. Thank you very much for coming here. Hit subscribe, turn on your notifications, follow along with all of our Marvel Cinematic Universe analysis. But really, we got to start here at the end with the finale of Loki Season 2.
Look at this.
The biggest question everybody's probably asking at the end of this series finale is at the end of Loki. Are we going to see the character of Loki again in the MCU moving forward? Over the course of this Season 2, we watched him race to essentially save the TVA, which is the organization in the MCU that is keeping balance throughout the multiverse. We saw all of this stuff about a time loom and whether or not the time loom could be expanded to incorporate all of the multiverses that are spiraling out of the fact that Sylvie killed He Who Remains. And eventually, over the course of his journey, using very clever time travel, Loki determines that he's never going to be able to fix the loom. It's a problem that's essentially written into the code that the loom is a failsafe. He Who Remains has the upper hand, and the only way that Loki is going to be able to fix all of this is to change the algorithm and essentially become the time loom himself. It's a magnificent, magnificent conclusion to the character's journey, and through some spectacular visual effects and visuals that were, in my opinion, some of the best that we've seen in the MCU to this date. Loki assumes his throne as essentially the new stand-in for the time loom. However, in a beautiful showing of poetic justice, he turns the time loom and his version of it into essentially a mirror of the Asgardian tree, which was destroyed in Thor Ragnarok. But at the time when it was in existence, it served as the gateway bridge between the 9 realms, Midgard, or Earth being one of them, Asgard, of course, being the place where the gods live. And that visual is replicated again in the new sort of time loom that Loki is assuming as himself. So he's isolated. He has sacrificed a ton, but he's still alive. And if you're alive in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and even if you're dead sometimes, the MCU finds a way to bring you back. And I think at this point, Loki has been established as too important to the concept of the multiversal saga moving forward to not be addressed again. We're going to get to a point probably in movies like Avengers Kang Dynasty, or maybe even Avengers Secret War, where other people are going to have to figure out about the TVA. And they're going to have to learn about the Kang variants that are out there, constantly trying to rise back up to power, and the work of the TVA to eliminate those Kang variants. And we'll get to Renslayer and how she factors into that in a few minutes. But that's all going to trace back to Loki and the fact that he has reestablished himself as the focal point of this multiversal universe. And also you have Tom Hiddleston. And what this episode proved to us is that he's one of the best actors in the MCU at this point. He can do anything. He's so phenomenal. Like, he legitimately needs Emmy consideration for his work in this episode. So I do believe we're going to see Loki again, probably in one of the Avengers movies going forward. And honestly, it'd be stupid of Marvel Studios not to rely on Tom Hiddleston going forward, given the amount of star power that Marvel wants and needs in the MCU as they progress this story forward.
Trust me.
No.
I know what I'm doing.
No. What?
Now, when I go back to the clip about Tony and him talking about, like, there is no throne, okay, so Loki gets a throne. But then Tony says there's no version of this where you come out on top, and I find that to be really, really interesting because Loki made huge sacrifices to get to that point. One of the reasons why I think that Loki as a television show works better than most of the other MCU series up to this point is because it had a legitimate character arc for the main character that we cared about. If you look at Loki's journey from the beginning of Season 1, Episode 1 to where he ends, it's a remarkable progress for the god of mischief, essentially, and all the things that he had to overcome in order to get to where he is right now. And a huge part of it is sacrifice. There's a couple of really great conversations throughout the course of this finale, specifically the one that he has with a very early version of Mobius, where Mobius is telling this story about how he paused, for a second during a mission and didn't prune the person he was supposed to prune. And of course, we know that in the grand scheme of the Loki conversation, that means Sylvie. And then there's a great conversation with Loki and Sylvie, where she essentially says, look, I'm not going to let you off the hook. Like, if you have to sacrifice me in order to do this, then do it. But like, you have to live with the burden that comes with this. And that's been a through line of Loki season 2 all the way up to this point. The TVA agents who now have some form of conscience of the fact that they're pruning individual timelines, can they assume the guilt that comes with eliminating lives that are on that timeline in order to provide free will or preserve the sacred timeline? It's always been that yin and yang of what are we going to do? Loki decides that he has to take on the burden. That in order for him to become the new time loom or the tree that connects the multiverse, he's going to have to sacrifice everything that he has. And it's a truly depressing, kind of sad and devastating reality that he's now left in. That final shot is going to linger with me for a really long time, of Loki looking aged and heavy with the burden of the decision that he made. That title card, when it hits, it's funny, where it says centuries later, because he had to learn all of this physics essentially in order to explain the time loom. But then you go and think about how long he's been living with that. It's a great scene with Tom Hiddleston and Jonathan Majors, where He Who Remains is like, oh, you've lived through all this. You finally figured it out. And you feel the weight of how long Loki, the character, probably had to endure to get him to that point. And it's just to get to the point where he has to let everything go. Now, he sacrificed for the good of his friends, and that was established in the previous episode that that's what's important to him. His friends being happy and having the ability to have free choice. That's where we leave Mobius. That's where we leave Sylvie. But to me, it also leaves Loki in a really sad place. The right place for this journey, but a really sad place for the character.
Most purpose is more burden than glory. Now, there's no comfort. You just choose your burden.
All right, so the big question on everybody's mind, I've seen it all over social media, is are we getting Loki season 3? And that's like the go-to default reaction from Marvel fans. Like, what's next? When are we going to see these people again? But I believe that we got closure for all the major characters. And before I even get into where we left all these people off, I want to point out that I spoke to Eric Martin, the head writer of Loki season 1 and 2, and he has kind of said that like they're not thinking of a Loki season 3, that he's envisioned season 1 and season 2 as two halves of a book. And he thought the end of season 2 was closing the book on Loki and the TVA. Now, as I mentioned, I think Loki's too powerful and it's going to have to be referenced in the MCU going forward, but just not in the course of this storyline. There's also that tease that eventually Loki and Thor are going to, quote unquote, stand together in the sun. And I think Marvel fans want to see that payoff. I think we're going to get another Hiddleston and Chris Hemsworth scene moving forward. But for now, the book seems closed. However, let's also note that in the MCU, there's like ample reason to believe the characters can be brought back and are still existing even after they've died. We saw in Thor, Love and Thunder that Valhalla exists, and we saw Natalie Portman's character go there with Idris Elba's character as well too, so they're still around. Loki, as I said, is still alive in some form, and I do believe that they're going to have to get to a point where he and Hemsworth get a scene together. And of course, Jonathan Majors leaves us with the constant out of any complicated situation when he tells Loki,
Reincarnation, baby.
we can bring these characters back any way that we want to.
Bingo.
However, the key characters in the TVA seem to be at a place where now they are at the end of their journey. And maybe we'll see the TVA again. I do think the TVA is going to be important. But Mobius in particular, he gets to sort of overlook his family from a distance, maybe interact with them, maybe not. Sylvie is going off to live her life and have some sort of free will. We do see B-15 and OB and Casey, they're sort of running the day-to-day of the TVA, but the TVA's new mission seems to be to prune Kang variants. And then there's the case of Renslayer. So what happens to Judge Renslayer? We know that she's the important person in Mobius's analogy, where she does prune the person that Mobius pauses briefly to not get, and she knows the ultimate goal of the TVA is to preserve the sacred timeline. However, we got a quick shot of young Victor Timely staring at his window where a TVA guidebook does not come through. And then we see Renslayer at the Void at the end of time, wearing her clothes from the Chicago World's Fair, which leads me to believe that she was pruned before she was able to give that TVA book to Victor Timely, thereby preserving that version of the character to never really learn anything about time travel or figure out the mechanics of the TVA, and therefore not create a Kang variant moving forward. Oh, I loved when Jonathan Majors switched into his Victor Timely stutter.
Wait, don't tell me. You're having some problems with the temporal loom.
It goes to show how talented he can be when he's doing the different variants of Kang. And then I think Renslayer gets consumed by Eliath. I mean, I think that's the end for her. Like, you see the purple lights, you see she looks terrified, and that seems like the end. A closed book on virtually all of these characters moving forward. Probably not the answer that you guys wanted to hear, but I didn't see any real dangling threads that a Loki season 3 needs to pull on. So I kind of think that's the end for this story.
See you around, I guess.
So that means the MCU is finished, right? No, not at all. However, it does mean that we're probably going to see some multiversal action happening in, I believe, Deadpool 3. We are seeing that the MCU is starting to delineate between these Marvel Spotlight stories and then Marvel stories that are significant to the multiversal saga moving forward. Echo is technically the next Marvel story that's coming, and that's going to be in January on Disney+. I think the story of the TVA and the multiverse and Kang and all these different timelines will be picked up in Deadpool 3, which now we know, thanks to Disney's reshuffling, is the only MCU movie that we are getting in theaters in the year 2024. Based on what happened in the Marvels, and I can't really talk about it right now, although I have a video on Cinema Blend's YouTube channel that you can watch that describes something that happens in the post-credit scenes, so go watch that right now. It probably sets up where we're going in Deadpool 3 and how the events of different multiverses can tie into the Marvel Cinematic Universe future and its past. So go watch that video and get very excited for where we're going to see the continuation of the Marvel multiversal saga, as I mentioned, in Deadpool 3. In the meantime, you're going to want to keep it here because we're getting into the best type of Marvel Studios analysis on Cinema Blend's YouTube channel. So hit subscribe, turn on your notifications, and the minute we have something really fun and exciting to discuss with you guys, Marvel fans, you'll be the first ones to hear about it.